to the How to Podcast series. I have a co-host today. Arden Coutts is with me. Arden is here. Arden has the CEI Media LLC out there to help podcasters, and Arden's here to talk about 4 things today. Co-hosting with me, why we love podcasting, what keeps us coming back to podcasting, having multiple podcasts, and operating your podcast as a business or as a hobby. And we share lots of great stories and lots of laughs together. Welcome to the How to Podcast series. Arden is with me. Are you ready? Here we go. Okay, so when you have an amazing person reach out to you, now for the 3rd time, to be on your podcast, you say yes. You don't even look at what we're talking about. You just say yes. And my guest is Arden is here with me. Arden has CEI Media. You can tell by the great background there. I have zero swag background, so I'm already jealous. Arden, welcome to the podcast as my co-host. How are you?
Yay. Thank you. And I'm so excited to be back. Honestly, cannot express how much I love being on your podcast. So thank you for having me yet again.
So if you're watching the video and you see how animated Arden is right now, even though we don't have a sponsor and we'll get into this, Arden is definitely being supported by caffeine today. So yes, you can see by the waving of arms and the dancing in your chair, we are both enjoying a cup of coffee or several and having a great time doing so. Welcome.
Yes, I have consumed all the coffee today.
Welcome. Tell everybody where you are in the world.
Yes, I am in North Carolina by Raleigh. So we are quite a ways away from one another, I do believe. But that's the wonderful thing about podcasting.
But close in our heart.
Exactly.
Okay, let's plug you right up front because some people come for the beginning of the podcast and go, should I stick around? Yes, you should stick around because Arden's going to tell you about the business. Arden, tell me about the business. What do you do and who do you help?
The CEI Media. I do social media management, social media marketing, podcast coaching and mentoring, a little bit of everything, but the goal is always to share people's stories however I can. So that may be through social media graphics, captions, or it might be helping you start a podcast. So,
what is your superpower?
Oh my gosh, my superpower, storytelling. I mean, that is it. Drop the mic.
I love it. Okay, that's great. And I'm Dave. TrueMediaSolutions.ca is my website for my 6 podcasts that we do. I have in 1 year, Arden, 280 episodes in 1 year.
Oh, that's wild. I honestly don't know how you do it.
Ridiculous. One podcast, I have 107 episodes, Living the Next Chapter. It's for authors. And that one started at the request of a friend who's a publisher and said, Dave, can you create a podcast? I'm not even an author.
It's perfect, though.
I've never written a book in my life. I might, but I get to talk to amazing people around the world and jump from continent to continent all in one day and speak to people that change your life.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And now you have all this amazing information that you've gathered through your podcast that you can apply when you write your own book.
I'm going to write my book about you.
No, God. Oh, God, no. No need. No.
Yeah. Okay, so we are co-hosting. This is not an interview for those listening. Yes. This is not an interview. I'm not interviewing Arden. Arden and I are co-hosting. I'll give you a moment to think about that. We're co-hosting. So, Arden, you sent over a few things that you want to talk about, and we'll say them off the top, and then we're going to kind of jump in. We'll see where we go. You had mentioned why we love podcasting. Ding, ding. What keeps you coming back, maybe as a podcaster or a listener? Having multiple podcasts, hand raised.
Yep.
And I added one at the end here, podcasting as a hobby or as a business, and why you need to determine which one is which.
So important.
Let's start at the top. You have why we love podcasting I am flipping the mic to you. I'm having a beverage.
Yes, that is one of my big things about one of the things I focus on when I do like podcast coaching is talking to people about why they want to start podcasting. Because when you don't have the passion behind it, it's really hard to keep going. And you have to really love what you're talking about and really have a passion for the topic or the genre, I guess, of what your podcast is. So it's loving your podcast is vital. And so I wanted to talk about why we love podcasting and why we got into it a little bit, and wanted to hear really more about your story because I'm very interested. But
I am blushing.
I mean, to have 6 podcasts, you have to really love podcasting and to really get something out of it.
Or I have a really bad problem. One of the two. We have to determine that off the top.
I don't know if having too many podcasts is a problem.
Well, you're jumping ahead to number 3 here on my list. So
That's true. But
okay.
Why we love podcasting.
Okay, before I answer that, you answer that. I would love to hear your story. Come on.
I think the number one thing I love the most about podcasting is being able to connect with people from everywhere. Because you literally, it's everyone, everywhere. Even if you're not interviewing them or talking to them in person, you're reaching them through their earbuds. So like, it's just a cool, like something I really enjoy. I try not to look at stats, right? Like a whole lot, like, oh, how many downloads, blah, blah, blah. But what I do enjoy doing is looking at where my podcast is being listened to. Yeah. Because it's really neat to be like, holy crap, like someone in, Asia or in Australia or, in Canada is listening to my podcast. That blows my mind. Like my voice has made it to all these other people, and hopefully something I'm talking about or something my guests are talking about is impacting them in some way. And that is one of the things that I really love about podcasting. It's the connection, and then it's that hope, I guess, that you're making an impact on someone's life, even if it's just like the tiniest, maybe it's just bringing a smile to someone's face. And that's great. That's all I want to do.
Yeah, for me, my wife and I opened a business 4 weeks before the pandemic came. Terrible
Great timing.
Yeah. So then we had to pay for a storefront for 6 months, and it was completely closed. Like we weren't allowed to open. But I had 6 months of lease payments and hydro and internet, everything.
Oh, no.
And no sales. 0. So I had to go back to work. I had quit my job to start the store. Went back and I said, well, Arden, I'm going to I'll work for a month and get ourselves back, because it's only going to be a week or 2, right? That we're closed. This pandemic thing is just short term.
Yeah.
Right? It'll pass. So I'll go work nights for a few weeks or a month and then get back to it. 3 years later, I'm still working full-time nights. Right now, I'm working 6 nights a week. I have one night. I have tonight off. And then I'm back for another 6. And I'm still... So what I was doing is I'm working an overnight shift. I work by myself. I have free Wi-Fi. So I listen to music. And after a while, I'm like, I'll give podcasting a try. I didn't think I would like it, to be quite honest, as a listener. I didn't know if I wanted somebody yammering away in my ears while I'm trying to do something. But I clicked play on my first podcast and went, how did I not know about podcasting?
Where has this been?
I didn't get the memo. Nobody told me about this amazing thing. And as a small business owner, I went, I need this. My store is closed, but I have customers around the world who buy my product. Why am I not talking to them? So I came home. I said to my wife, Jennifer, we're going to start a podcast. She said, what the heck is a podcast? She had no idea either, right? And we're like 2 newbies going, okay, let's just hit record and see how all this stuff works. Listen to a lot of podcasts now because I'm being paid to listen to podcasts technically. at work, and I would take pieces of cardboard or whatever I could find and jot notes when I listened to great podcasts. And I'm like, let's just make one. So we started, and we created our first one, Upcycle Canada podcast. And right now, that podcast is 1 year old now, and it's about 4,000 downloads, which is fine. I'm happy with that.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
that's awesome.
And we're in 72 countries.
That's so cool.
And it's opened the doors to talk to people in our niche, our niche, or niche that do what we do around the world. And I would never have the opportunity to reach out to somebody or connect with somebody that I admire. Somebody that I admire, so that because I never had a show, right? Who would talk to me?
Yeah.
Who would talk to me? I'm just some guy in Canada. But when I reach out and say, hey, I have a podcast, Arden, would you like to come on my podcast? Arden goes, all right.
I go, yes,
and
immediately.
Right? And so that just led to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. And for me, podcasting is a complete and utter joy because of who you meet. I haven't made one sweet penny on all 6 podcasts. It only cost me money. But right after we talk later today, one of my past guests reached out to me and said, Dave, I know we had a great conversation on the podcast when we recorded. I now want to start a podcast. Can you help me?
Yep.
And so now I'm going to be working with them. I've never advertised. Again, this would be another thing on the plate. But when somebody you know and trust and you've worked with already reaches out and says, I value what you do. Can you help me? Yes, is a simple answer to that. So
absolutely,
that's where it all goes.
It's amazing. Like the connections you make are truly fantastic. And like, you can interview somebody and then I'm always surprised at how often I stay in touch with people that I've had on the podcast. And like, we just keep talking and like,
yeah, exactly.
Like sometimes I'll have them on again as another guest, or sometimes we're just, social media buddies. And like, that's amazing because I don't know, like for some reason, Australia is like a really popular area and for me and for my podcast. And I have a lot of guests from there and a lot of listeners from there. And never in a million years would have been like, yeah, like one day my podcast is going to be in Australia and I'm going to talk to all these like amazing entrepreneurs from Australia. And that's going to be a huge part of my life. Like, what? And my podcast has made that possible. And it's just the coolest thing. It's so cool.
And the other part too, I love is the lack of competition and the increased community. So even though here we are, 2 people, my first client will be later today. And then there's you, you're way down the path compared to I am in that sense. And I look up to you as a business owner who created something from a side hustle and made your dreams come true. You inspire me. And it's like, why would 2 people who are kind of doing similar things not be like giving each other the stink eye of, don't you dare take my people. Don't you take my idea. It's my idea, right? But here we are talking together on how we can lift each other up, share a message together, do community, support each other. Like, who does that, right? Coke and Pepsi, are they out there saying, I love what you guys do?
Yeah, patting each other's backs.
I love it, right? No, you're the best. No, you're the best. No, you're the best. No, that doesn't happen. Right?
That's the community, though. Podcast community is amazing. Yeah.
So I think we've already jumped into number 2.
Yes.
What keeps you coming back, right? What else on top of that keeps you coming back?
The community, the people, again, just meeting people. And then I genuinely just like learning about other people and like hearing I get so much joy out of hearing about other people's experiences, which is something, again, like in my younger years, I was like super competitive, right? Like you just mentioned being competitive with each other. If we had met when I was in my like early 20s, I would have been like, get out of here. Like you're taking my customers, or like it would have been a whole different vibe. But like now as I've gotten older and like, again, join these communities where it is not to be cliche, but it is like community over competition vibe. It's opened up this whole other side of me where I want to hear about your successes. I want to hear about them. I want to like be in that joy with you as you tell me about like just the awesome things that are going on in your life and the amazing things that you've done with your businesses and like your successes. Like nothing like there, I get so much joy from that. And I love being able to share those stories on my podcast that like, that's what keeps me coming back. It's almost like, you know, you have like adrenaline junkies. Yep. Like I'm a little bit of like a good news junkie, maybe. Like nice. I love those stories, but
and we need more of that, more and more and more and more of that.
Yeah, the good news,
right? And like I've had people on my podcast that I don't necessarily agree with fundamentally. Like again, going back to my earlier days, I might have been quite cynical. I'm not a very vocal guy. Like I'm not really out there preachy, but in my back of my mind, I'd be like, I don't know if I really agree with that person 100%, but most of that was because I didn't know them. And all I have is what I see and my lens on them. And that is scary, hurtful, because you may miss an opportunity to talk to somebody or build a community with somebody who you may have not welcomed in the past. And then makes you realize how terrible that is to even be able to, and how sobering that is to go, wait, I could have missed an opportunity to talk to somebody who doesn't think like me, doesn't believe like me, doesn't see the world like I do. Yet I can learn so much from a conversation with that person that can shape me or make me a better person. And even if I still am at the point where I'm like, I can still respect and have a great conversation and build a community with them without judgment, without my side versus your side. You're seeing a lot of this. We're all seeing this right now. It's playing out everywhere to various degrees. But imagine if we could just talk as two human beings and build a bridge and mutually respect, love, care for the person.
Yeah, so
I think that would be that's like the framework of everything we need right now. And if a podcast can be a small part of that, that's what brings me back.
I love that. Sharing other people's views and in a constructive and like safe way, if that makes sense.
It's not about what makes us different, but what makes us what we found the same.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, that's an amazing reason why.
Imagine if the world was like that, though.
Yeah.
Or you didn't have to look over your shoulder or wonder what that person's thinking, or right. And I heard somebody say that, well, I'm afraid to be a podcaster. I'm afraid to be judged. And the one person said, well, if you've ever been shopping in public, you've been judged.
Yeah.
The person standing behind you in line is like, oh my gosh, look at their clothes. Look at the amount of money. Look what they're buying. Oh,
yeah.
That's not healthy. Right. I don't like that. I don't like that person's haircut. I don't like their car. I don't like their. It happens all the time.
It's so funny you say that too, because I'm very like, anxious as a person. Like I have really bad social anxiety and I'm always worried about like what other people think of me and like being judged. But for some reason, probably the one area in my life where I don't feel like I'm being judged is my podcast. And this kind of probably goes into a little bit about like the hobby versus business podcast aspect, but I get so much joy from it that I guess I don't really care if people have a problem with it, or like, I don't know. It's the one place where I feel like I can be myself and voice what I want to voice, and I don't have to worry about being judged. So it's kind of an interesting aspect of podcasting, I guess, for me. There's no anxiety there, which is really nice.
Okay, so what we're going to do, Arden, is because we're halfway through our list and we're using the free version of Zoom because we're both podcasters with no money.
Exactly.
We are going to come back and do in the second part of this in a moment. But what we're going to do is insert a commercial for you right here off the cuff, and we're going to make it a commercial, all right, for you. So think about this for a second. I'll give you a moment to collect your thoughts. And again, we're going to come back after this commercial with the remaining two topics we're going to talk about. But let's hear the commercial. What would you say to me as a new person? I'm scrolling through social media. I'm going through podcasts, and I'm like, what's CEI Media? I have no idea what this is. Go. What do I need to know about you and the contacts? Commercial begins in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, welcome to CEI Media. Create, engage, inspire. We are here to create content for you that engages your audience and inspires your audience to get involved with your business and your services. We do social media management. We do social media creation, graphics, captions, copywriting, podcast coaching, website design, you name it, we do it. So you can visit us. Our brand new website is www.ceimediallc.com, and you can sign up for a free business brainstorm session with me.
There it is. That's it. That's the commercial. Go there. CEI Media. Well done. Off the top of your head. Well done. Again, go there. Send all the love. Send all your money.
Yeah.
And make sure you hire Arden. And so great. We're back for the second half of our co-hosted discussion around podcasting. We've talked about why we love podcasting and what keeps bringing us back. Love the conversation so far, Arden. Thank you. We have 2 more. Having multiple podcasts, that'll be an interesting conversation, and podcasting as a hobby or a business, and why we need to kind of determine which is where we're headed. So, multiple podcasts.
Yes.
Having as a host. Where do you want to go down the path on this one? There's many things I can think about.
Well, I mean, I only had 2 at one point. I only have 1 now because I had to downsize. But you have 6 now?
6.
I
have a few more ideas too, but I'm not. My wife said no more. Don't. But I'm like, oh, but I got this really. No. So yeah, I do have
I am in awe of you that you have 6 and that you're able to do 6, because it takes so much like effort on the back end to podcast. And I don't think people maybe like realize that, but like with the editing and the booking of guests and the pre-interviews and like all of that, like it takes up a ton of time, or it can.
Yeah.
And you have 6, which is...
I actually have, underneath my monitor, I actually have the name of the podcast that I'm talking about right now, because I forget sometimes. Because I get lost in the conversation and I'm like, so yeah, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. And my guest is like,
which one is that?
Well, what? Yeah. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong podcast. So yeah, it's crazy. Again, it's like 280 episodes in less than a year. And like, it does take a lot. And for all my interviews, I always pre-interview.
As you should.
Yes, thank you. So that's another half hour, 40-minute conversation before you even hit record.
That's so much. And you work.
Right. And then, yeah. And then people say it's like, 4 times the recorded time, roughly, in work, behind the scenes, pre and post. Generally, 4 times. So if it's an hour podcast, it's 4 hours of effort. Generally, I would say. So yeah, there's a lot of hours in there.
It adds up.
Right.
Yeah.
So being organized is one of the things that I love. I'm not I'm not perfect at it. I gotta admit, there's a lot of times where, because I'm working night shift as well, where I actually, and the host or the guest was very gracious because I completely slept through our
Oh
interview
no.
because it was like 2 a.m. my time
Oh,
because I sleep during the day, so 2 p.m. the actual time. But I was done. I couldn't get up,
oh yeah.
and I woke up and I looked at my clock and went, "Oh no." So I had to send a very apologetic email, and we were able to reschedule. But yeah, that's just the reality of who you are. But I think if you can come up with a system that helps you and doesn't take even more time to maintain, that's one of the big advantages. So automating your calendar, for example, setting up meetings, having a process that works for you, because not every my process might not work for you at all, but for me, it's exactly what I need to keep me on task. And I don't have a lot of squirrel moments where I kind of go in different directions. I'm usually here at my desk plugging away, and I'm good. Like I can just go from task to task to task. And it's not just the podcast. I have the websites for every podcast. I have the social media accounts for all the podcasts.
Yes.
I have all the emails. I have all the billing to pay for everything. All that on top of it. It's like having 6 businesses running at the same time.
It's a lot.
So it is a lot. And I'm feeling tired as I talk about it.
I'm tired listening to you talk about it. That's a lot.
Okay, so I'll stop talking.
No.
Yeah.
It's just so much.
I know. Right. So, but I just, Arden, I find so much joy in the topics that I discuss, and I have 6 completely different audiences. And I mentioned I work night shift, and I work last night. So right now it's like 4 a.m. for me, my time. So I just kind of do the math. But last night at work, one of my coworkers came up to me, and we all have earbuds. We're all working night shift. We all work by ourselves. And she came up to me. Her name is Kathy. And she said, "Dave, I love podcast episode, whatever, and your guest, and that you talked about this. I found that so inspiring. I'm sharing it with all my friends." And I'm like, I'm actually standing in front of my audience.
That's amazing.
Like, I can see the color in her eyes. And as podcasters, we sit in front of a microphone, we hit record, we put it out in the world and go, I don't know, is anybody listening to this? Like, right? But to have somebody physically walk into your space and stand in front of you and tell you that your podcast matters, like, I want to go create 6 more. Because, right, like, for that person in that moment, in that time, the topic or whatever we talked about meant something to them and touched them. That's the joy of why we do what we do. That's why I do this, right? And the one thing that I'm really battling with right now is sales funnels, is getting people into our world and making them jump through hoops. I want to take the word fun out of funnels and put it back into podcasting. Podcasting should be fun for the listener. Podcasting should be fun for the host, for the guest. Let's put fun back into the mix, right?
I love that.
So I want to put fun back into podcasting. I want to put social back into social media.
Yes, build a community.
Those words are important. They're important, right?
Yes.
And stop it coming to this for what podcasting can give me back as a host, but what I can give back as a host. And whether that's creating connections, building community, entertaining somebody, giving somebody the power to overcome or look at something differently because of my podcast. I feel like that is a superpower of any podcaster. So if you're a new podcaster listening to this and listening to our conversation, you're like on the fence, like, who would ever listen to me? Arden, who would ever listen to you? Why would you be the expert, right?
Right.
Like,
it's just do it.
with all of the imperfections, with all the ums, the ahs, all the mistakes, I recorded a podcast last week, and my wife and I have two separate mics, and I had plugged in don't ever do this. I plugged in her mic to do some testing, but I forgot that I had plugged it in. So I recorded an entire podcast with a mic across the room from me. Was the active mic, not this one in front of me. And when I listen back to it, I'm like, why do I sound horrible? Oh, the mic that's 5 feet away from me was the one that recorded me. And I'm like, oh no. But you know what? The conversation was so amazing. The guest was so amazing. I'm like,
Yep. It's part of the process.
It's fine. It's fine. I'm good. Right? It's never going to be perfect, Arden.
Yeah.
But just go. Just go.
And I think that's what keeps people coming back as well to podcasts. Like, because we talked about like what keeps us coming back earlier. And I know one of the reasons why I listen to podcasts and what keeps me listening is the human factor. Like I love listening to podcasts where it's just two best friends sitting down, shooting the shit, just talking about whatever. Yeah. And like, I love that because I feel like I'm a part of that conversation and that community. And like, I am there with them. And that includes all the, like you were saying, the ums, the buts, the likes, the weird pauses. Like, I try to edit some of those out, but if you listen to a podcast that doesn't have any of that in there, a lot of the times it doesn't sound real. It doesn't sound authentic because there's that human factor is removed a little bit. And so I think that's like another part of podcasting that keeps people engaged, keeps them coming back is the realness. And like you said, like, if you're worried about, oh, should I have a podcast? Who's going to listen? Like, do it for yourself. That's why I started mine. It was for me. It was to help me get out of like a rough spot that I was in. And I used it as a way to push myself out of my comfort zone. And that was 3 years ago. So like, do it for yourself. Don't necessarily do it for somebody else.
Okay. So this is I love where you're going with this. Okay. So I always hear people, all the gurus, all the experts out there saying, Arden, before you start your podcast, you got to figure out who your avatar is. And that's a character from a movie. So I prefer the word listener because that's a human. An avatar is a computer. I create podcasts for people, not an algorithm.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm on my soapbox for a second. Sorry. I create content, show notes for people. I don't create it for Google.
Yep.
Google has never bought any of my products. Shocking. They don't care about me. They love my content and they love sharing my content. I thank you, Google. But they've never been my customer. Yeah. So why am I serving them? I serve my listener. So if you're a new podcaster and you're like, I don't know who my podcast is for, my answer is my podcast is, this may sound selfish, my podcast is for me. I'm the listener.
Yep.
I don't record podcast episodes for a imaginary person that I've never met. I record my podcast for me. And if you like my podcast, you're going to like me because it's for me. I'm talking to these people. I'm talking to Arden because I want to talk to Arden. This is for me. I'm being completely selfish.
Yeah, that's why I started mine.
And this is what, so when you're trying to draw out, okay, well, my listener lives in San Diego. They've got a dog named Ralph. They like apples, but they don't like pears. They've never enjoyed celery. Their favorite movie is Sleepless in Seattle. Like, I don't know. I don't have time for that. My podcast is for me.
Yeah.
I create the content for me. If you come to this podcast and you love the content and you love my guests, you're going to love hanging out with me. So I don't make it for someone else. I make it for me.
I think that is how...
That's my soapbox.
I'm like right there with you. I'm like, yes, preach, David, preach. I think that is so important. And that's going to keep you going too. Because again, it goes back to like, if you're enjoying it and you're enjoying what you're talking about, what you're learning about, or like, even if it's just you sharing your thoughts on a topic for 10 minutes a day or 10 minutes a week, but you enjoy doing that, then do it. Like, someone will find your content and will vibe with it, and those are your people. That's your community. Like, it's not going to be for everyone. You can't please everyone, but like the people that connect with it, those are the people you probably want to be like connecting with anyways. And that's where you start.
And how do you make your podcast unique? If you make it for yourself, if you make it all about, and again, it sounds really weird to say this out loud, if you make it all about you and what interests you and who you are, and that's one thing that no one else can copy. I can't be Arden.
Yeah.
Arden, you can't be me. Right? So the one thing that we do best is us.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else can do it better than we can. So that means our podcast, if it's built around the things that genuinely interest us. Like when I have an interview with somebody, I am truly interested in this person. I'm not doing, okay, Arden, question number 2. What is your favorite pudding? Thank you. And you share this heart-wrenching story about your childhood. And I'm like,
on to the next.
And question number 3, right? You're like, are we having a conversation or am I being interrogated?
Yeah.
So I genuinely care about my guests. I genuinely care about my listener, and I'm doing what interests me. And if it doesn't interest you, there are a bazillion other podcasts. Please go find the one that interests you. And I'm okay with that. And there's podcasters that are going to have a complete meltdown when they hear me say that, because they want everyone to love them. The chances of everyone loving you is pretty slim.
I think we're giving a lot of podcasters out there like heart palpitations right now with this conversation because we're breaking all of the rules. No.
Are we going to get like, what's going to happen to us?
We're going to get canceled. They're going to kick us out of the podcast community.
Okay, you two out of the pool.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like everything you're saying. Well, and I think I also feel like when you're genuinely interested in what you're podcasting about, people pick up on that. Like people are going to be like, oh, holy cow. Like Dave is like really into this book or really into this side hustle conversation. And like, you can tell if somebody is into the conversation that they're having. And that makes it like all the more interesting. Like one of my favorite podcasts, it's like a guilty pleasure podcast, but it's 2 ladies that recap really bad reality shows, but they love them. And you can hear how much they love just talking about these really crappy reality TV shows. And I don't even watch the shows because I just listen to them and I'm like, that's all I need to know. Like I would rather hear their version of what happened on that show than actually watch it because it's so much more entertaining to me. And they're so joyful and like what they're talking about that it just, you know, makes me giddy almost with how much they love what they're doing. And that's what I want people to feel when they listen to my podcast. I want them to have that experience, whether they're feeling inspired or joyful, or maybe it's a downer, episode. Maybe they're feeling a little down with me, but like, that's all. I think goes back to like storytelling, right? Like you want people to engage with your stories and to feel what you're putting out there. And that's one of the reasons why I love any form of storytelling, because you really connect with people. Podcasting.
And as you're talking, I'm thinking, okay, I jump back to my Living the Next Chapter podcast, 108 episodes, I think I'm at right now. And that's in 7 months. There's absolutely no way that I could read 108 books in 7 months. That's insane. So I have read some of my authors' books, and some of them are so generous. They send me a copy, and they autograph it. I'm like, thank you so much. It's amazing. So a little tip for anybody that does interviews with, say, an author, if you don't have time to read the book or you don't have the money to buy all these books, then study the topic. So if they're writing about traumatic brain injury and you have no idea what that is, if you want to have a great conversation with an author and you haven't read their book, study their topic. come with knowledge about what is passionate to them, and don't focus so much on the book. You sell the book, yes, but sell the content.
Yes.
Like, have that conversation, because the person that's listening that is looking for that topic will love the conversation if you as a host are genuinely interested in the topic, and then you kind of lead into the book and promote the book as well. And it doesn't become a commercial. It's not an infomercial. It's a topic that we really are really into that. So that's kind of my little hack for doing that many interviews, is be really interested in the topic, so that you can come with knowledge and with passion.
But I was going to say that's also an amazing tip for authors that are looking to get PR for their books, is exactly what you just said, is focus on the topic or the overall theme of the book. So maybe you've written a fictional story about, I don't know, characters and that have mental health issues. So focus on mental health as a topic and pitch that for your PR, and focus on that rather than just the book.
Or if you're an author, like this is one Arden something.
No.
Wrote a book. Like a really there's a book, and the author's name is Arden Coutts. I think Arden something. Yeah, maybe you know a little bit about being an author.
Just a little bit. Fall into Midnight, folks.
Stick it in there.
Pick
Come
up
on.
Fall into Midnight wherever you get your books.
Link in the bio. Link in the show notes. There you go. See, that's what we do. Okay, so having multiple podcasts, do you feel like we touched that? We can always talk more, but
I feel good about that. And I really, this is another topic. The next one, the hobby versus biz podcast, is another one that might just get us kicked out of the whole podcast crew.
Okay, so Arden, I've had one episode. It's been out for 5 minutes, and I haven't made any money yet. What's going on? When do I make money with my podcast?
Must stop podcasting now.
You know, I'm using a free hosting site. I'm using my cell phone, and it sounds like I'm talking underwater. And I haven't made a penny yet. Why?
Just give up. Just give up.
Okay. All right. I'm done.
I'm out of here. But it's funny though, because when I mentor, I get a lot of people that come into podcasting, and they literally, like, the first thing they say is, I want to make money doing this. And I'm like, well, we should reassess your reasons for getting into podcasting. Like, you can make money with podcasts. Yes. Are you going to become like a billionaire from podcasting? Nah, probably not. Maybe, and like 1 in a million, maybe. But like, they see these people see these like celebrities, like people who had a huge fan base before they started podcasting, that become podcasters, that are making thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars from podcasting, and think that that's going to be their experience, when the reality is not that.
If you have a podcast about watching your favorite TV show and you want to recap this TV show, okay, great. But what do you want your listeners to do with that? Like, is it something that's going to add value to their life? Are you trying to entertain them? Like, I just kind of need to know where your head's at, because just having a podcast doesn't mean you're going to make money. Right? So you really need to determine, is this just a hobby, or is this a business that maybe you have a business and the podcast is going to support your business? Mm-hmm. Great. You are your own advertiser. You don't need anybody else. This is a perfect thing for a small business, a coach, an author. This is the perfect way to sell your product, is to be the expert and to host a podcast. Please start one now. Talk to Arden. Call Arden right now and say, I want a podcast. Do it. Well, again, Arden is further down the road than I am, and I completely acknowledge that, and I appreciate that. So, but contact somebody and say, listen, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no equipment, but I have a message. I would rather talk to somebody who has a message before I talk to somebody who has a microphone and no message.
Yeah.
because I see these in Facebook groups. Hey guys, I bought all the gear. I spent $5,000 on everything. I'm ready to go. What should my podcast be about, Arden? And you're like, oh my gosh.
No.
See, there's a cart and there's a horse. You have it backwards. Like, horses don't push, they pull. Come on, people.
I hate saying that too, because that's another thing I tell people. Like, when someone approaches me about like, oh, I want to start a podcast, I go, okay, great. Like, let's sit down and let's talk about these 5 things before you buy anything. Like, I want to know, like you were saying, right? I want to know your purpose. I want to know what your podcast is going to be about. I want to know like some of the topics you want to cover. Like, let's work out the format, the structure, like all those things, because I always use this as an example because this is what I did. I went out, I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know how I was going to execute it. So I went out and I bought all this gear and then realized my podcast is one where I'm on the go. Like, I was going out to events, I was interviewing people at events, but I bought all this podcast gear for a desk setup because I hadn't figured out the structure or the format yet to my podcast. So I spent all this money on gear that I still have not used to this day. And because all I needed was like a lavalier or a lapel mic that I could take with me and interview people on the go. And that it was $12, I could have spent $12 on Amazon instead I spent, like $500 on a bunch of shit I didn't need. And so I share that story with new podcasters all the time because I'm like, sit down and think about this before you just dive in and spend all that time and money on something that like you don't have all the pieces to yet. So yeah,
it's backwards. So going back to that whole topic about answering that question. So here's my statement. Okay, this is a podcast about insert topic for insert your audience, so that my audience will, and what is the result? So here's an example, filling it in, okay? And I helped somebody with this already. So they have a real estate thing. So this is a podcast about real estate. And now who's it for? This is a podcast about real estate for new home buyers. Not people who are trying to buy rental property, not for commercial. This is a real estate podcast for new home buyers, so that my audience will hire me as their real estate agent.
It's your purpose statement right there.
That is it. So if you can answer those questions, and I'll put this format in the show notes, but if you can answer that, right? This podcast is about podcasting for all podcasters. No, for new podcasters, so that they will start their podcast in 60 days. I don't know, right? But you're really, really, really getting down to the part that your podcast is for.
Yeah, you got to niche down.
When you see your city buses drive by, you notice that they usually have the location at the top of where they're headed next. Every podcast should have a location to where they're heading. It should say right clearly, hey, we're going to Main Street. If you this is the Main Street bus. Oh no, I'm waiting for the Bridge Street bus. Oh, that's the next one. Don't get on the Main Street bus. Get on the Bridge Street bus. Oh, it's right there on the bus. I can see where it's heading. And people create podcasts and they have no idea where they're going. They have no idea where they're headed. And who's going to get on that bus? Jump on, guys. We'll just kind of see where we go, right? We're going to create a podcast about something for somebody. Let's just see what happens. I haven't prepared. Let's hit record. Let's see what happens. Wait a minute. Right? That's not how you podcast.
No, and that's why a lot of new podcasters, what is the statistic? I think it's like most new podcasters don't make it past their 9th episode or something like that.
Yeah,
because they just
7 to 9, yeah.
They don't know where they're going. They don't have, and like, I know that not all podcasts have to be like planned out. I am a planner. I'm a little OCD about stuff, but like, if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to know what topics to come up with? how are you going to know what you're going to talk about every week or every other week or how often you have your episode? Like, oh man, I feel like we could do just an episode about starting a podcast. Podcasting 101.
Yeah. So, okay. So this, I think I can't, I hesitate saying this publicly because it might, somebody be like, hey, that's mine. But as I'm out working last night, I have this, I carry paper and cardboard and stuff with me so I can write down notes. But this came to me last night, and I'll throw it at you, see what your reaction. This is, I'm formulating this as my quote, but I have no idea if it's my quote, to be quite honest. But if you can't find commitment in the journey, Arden, when you arrive, it won't be waiting for you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can't, sorry, it's contentment. Let's do it again. If you can't find contentment in the journey, so just being content and be learning and growing and working your way through, if you can't find it in the journey, it won't be there when you arrive.
I love that. I feel like that resonates with me a lot because I feel like I'm always looking for that, like, for that contentment, that happiness somewhere where I'm like, that resonates with me a lot because it's if you're not enjoying the ride, what is kind of the purpose of the ride? Essentially.
And a lot of us seem to put our contentment on hold. Like, once I have my podcast, I'll be content.
Yeah.
Once I have the house, once I have the thing, once I have the job, once I have the book, once I have the company, the relationship, whatever that is, once I get there, I'll be content. But for now, I'm not, because I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
You need to be content now, because if you're not content right now, it won't meet you when you get to the end of that path.
I love that. Yeah, I'm like 100%. That's been my problem. I feel like through my entire 20s into some of my 30s. I'm getting better at it now that I'm in my mid 30s. I think I've finally realized what you just said. But to put it that way, just, I don't know, like really clicked with me just now. I was like, yeah, if you're just constantly chasing it, you're never gonna, like, it's never gonna be there in a way. Like, you have to create that contentment within yourself.
And for all our podcast gurus that are lurking in the background going, if you're not content in your podcast journey right now, and you're always looking for the next thing, you have an audience. It might be one person.
Yes, be happy with
shows
one
up,
person.
right? And the visual picture that I love to have when I'm podcasting, Arden, is, okay, so I have an episode, I release it, I have 10 listens, and everyone's like, that sucks. You're terrible. Your content's horrible. Your marketing's terrible. You need 1,000 downloads every episode if you're going to be anything of value. I picture this, Arden. I walk into a room. There's chairs. There's 10 people that show up for me every single frickin' week to hear me or my guests, and they love it.
Yep.
And if I walked up to the podium, I climbed up onto the stage, I turned and looked out over the 10, and I focus on the 90 empty seats. And I don't focus on the 10 people that show up on a regular basis. And I go, oh, there's only 10 people here. Why am I doing this? And the 10 people looking at each other, they're like, what about us?
Yeah.
Like, we're here. We're here for you.
Yeah.
I show up for the 10. I show up for the 1.
Yep.
And that's how you build a podcast. You don't hire somebody that says, I will get you listens.
Oh, God, no. Please don't do that.
Please don't.
Don't spend your money on that.
Don't build content for an AI, an algorithm, a search term. Don't build a podcast for a computer. We don't have avatars. We have listeners.
Yes.
We have community. We put social back in social media.
I'm just doing hand claps. I'm like, yes. So that's I could not agree more. Like, I love everything you just said. I don't think I have anything to add. Like, I love that. Put the social back in social media. Show up for those listeners that you do have, and build that community. So important.
Well, why is this not being talked about?
Because people want to make money. They want people to pay them. So they think that they'll
Okay, so this is a monster episode, and what I would love to say, Arden, is I would love to say this with confidence. You're coming back for more of this, right?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%.
Because anyone listening to you today is like, I need a little bit more Arden in my life. And I'd be like, yes, you do. So, Arden, before we close off, again, where do we find you? All that great stuff.
Yeah, you can stalk me on social media. We've got @CEI Media for business stuff. If you want to listen to the podcast or visit that on social media, it's the Fun with Friends podcast. It's all about getting out there, trying new things, and having fun while you do it. And if you're with your friends, it makes it even better. So talk a lot about business. Hopefully Dave will be on the podcast here one of these days. So we'll learn more about his podcast journey. And let's see. And I think that's mostly it. CEI LLC.com as well.
And again, I'm Dave from TrueMediaSolutions.ca. This is the How to Podcast series. My co-host, as always, the wonderful, the talented, the super smart Arden is with me. Thanks, Arden. That was fun.
Thank you. This was a blast. Thank you so much.
I love talking to you. All right. Thank you.